Hey all, Rolo here. Been a bit, I know. What can I say? I've been gaming. As you probably are aware, Dune Awakening launched a few weeks ago, and we've been going pretty hard on it. We've got a few hundred Dune players on the Discord doing all kinds of awesome stuff. Hit the link below if you want to join in on that. It's been a lot of fun. In hindsight, though, I wish I would have streamed opening day and maybe the day after, like I did when Ashes of Creation Alpha 2 went public. I'm going to make a concerted effort to do that kind of thing in the future for game launches like this, so that at least there's something going on here on the channel when I go all in like that. I'll never be an always-on streamer, but special events like that would be cool, I think. I enjoyed it the last time I did it. Anyway, what I wanted to talk about today is Dune and Star Citizen. I wanted to do a little comparing and contrasting. I got over 150 hours in Dune now, probably double that in the Discording around Dune, and a whole lot more than that in Star Citizen, of course. Now, me being me, we've got the technical angle of this channel too, and we're going to discuss some of the technicals of these games today as we get into things. I really wanted to make this video so that all of the time I took away from the channel to play and organize wasn't all for naught here. Now, before we dig in, I have one other thing I wanted to share. You may have watched the channel chat I did a while back with Tyler, CEO of Clockwork Labs, about their new MMO backend, Spacetime DB. Well, recently they launched their first MMO, Bitcraft Online, using this technology. So we're going to bring Tyler back on and chat about the launch of their game, see how things went, what worked, what didn't, and get into the weeds a bit. Should be another awesome conversation. Really looking forward to it, and I'm very grateful that Tyler was happy to come back and share some of this stuff with us. If you have any questions about the launch or about Spacetime DB, drop them in the comments below. Now, you're not going to have a whole lot of time because by the time this video makes it out, Tyler and I will be chatting not too long after that. So if you're watching this late Thursday, early Friday, and you have a question, jump down there, leave it ASAP. I'm going to do a final pass and look for any questions before I chat with Tyler, and I would love to have them in there. I also have a post which I created in which I was polling for questions. I'll link that below too. You can drop your questions there as well. It's going to be great. The chat is Friday, and I'll get it posted soon after that, as soon as I can. All right. Now let's dig in on today's topic. First, let's just give some props where props are due to an amazing game launch by the makers of Dune. Round of applause to you all, seriously. It was one of the best launches I've been through in recent years. I know there were a few hiccups, but I personally didn't hear of many people being really impacted. There were some crowding issues, of course, and servers filling up. But that was all expected long in advance if you paid attention to the architecture of the game and how they were setting up the servers and all that. But login servers stayed up. Siege servers, which are the sharded PvE hosts, they performed well. I noticed a little bit of lag, maybe twice on opening day, which was amazing. Overall, it performed admirably for launch day. The first few days after release, they were bringing servers down for patches at like 4 a.m. my time. Each patch seemed to be a step forward on performance and stability. I didn't notice any regressions. All in all, I have nothing bad to say about the game on these fronts. I think it is a job well done. So, seriously, awesome job. Continuing on the topic of an amazing launch, how about the content? It felt like a phenomenon to me at one point. There was just so much great content flowing onto the various platforms from a wide range of creators. The game was just so damn fun. All of the clips of folks getting eaten or chased by huge worms, by getting caught in spotlights and descended upon by hit squads, removing a pillar that toppled an entire skyscraper, drowning in quicksand. It was just all so entertaining. I was standing in the living room, my wife was howling at the stuff on YouTube, and I caught myself just sporting the biggest damn grin because like I had just gone through it all myself, and now I'm watching other people suffer through it in a purely fun and entertaining way. Now, as we're going to talk about more soon, as I got further into the game, I couldn't help but repeatedly acknowledge the fact that a really fun game doesn't need crazy technology. There is zero crazy tech in Dune Awakening. It's basically a triumph in pragmatism, if you ask me. But that doesn't mean there's not a strong place for games that are chasing crazy tech. And we're going to talk about that more too. There was so much done well. And I'm not going to dive deep into all of it. Plenty of other creators have done that for us, but I'll touch on a few things. One, the progression curve felt great. I've yet to feel stalled out. I'm always working toward the next thing. And now that I'm at the end, I'm enjoying the vision and the role of the deep desert. And I look forward to continuous engagements out there as well. So it feels like they've put a good bit of thought into the endgame loop. More so, at least, than some other games that I've played recently. Two, combat feels janky, but fun. I don't even know how else to say it. You know, it's better than the average survival crafting style of janky combat. But like that kind of janky feeling was somehow integrated to the point that it becomes part of the charm and part of the fun. Almost, but not quite akin to how like overcoming bugs in Star Citizen can become part of the appeal for some people. And we got people like that in our org who are just, they're so proud like when somebody else is encountering an issue and they know the solution and they come to the rescue. Some people might be sad whenever things smooth out to the point where that's not the case anymore. Anyway, 3, the vehicles are a lot of fun to drive and pilot. They don't have a perfect flight model, not by a long shot, but it's entertaining, despite breaking various laws of physics. It's kind of unapologetic in how it presents, and it works. Racing across sand dunes in a cycle was a blast. The big mining buggies feel appropriately heavier. And here's something surprising to me as a longtime Star Citizen player. The ground vehicles were able to traverse the terrain. I know, right? If your buggy encounters a rock, it just kind of crawls over it. I'm sitting here thinking, CIG, please hire whoever implemented ground traversal in this game. Now, there's some shitty shit too. Like, you can plunge your cycle off the highest mountain peak, crash it into the ground below, and it just sits there like nothing happened. I'd love to see some fiery death on that shit, but whatever, you know. And as it turns out, Dune is not without its own ground vehicle dancing. Plenty of people have gotten buggies to like spin endlessly on their nose, myself included. And, you know, it felt like home. Like I was back on my Origin 85X spinning like a blender in my hangar. I have a video of that. And all fell right for just a moment. But overall, you know, vehicles are very solid in Dune. The fun factor, at least. The survival aspects, they contribute to the entertainment too. Sandworms, obviously, are a constant threat. But things like sandworms and sandstorms and the heat of the day, the quicksand, the radiation, and of course thirst. I mean, you're always having to make sure that you got plenty of water on hand. They all come together to give you this sense of always needing to be on alert. Not in like a super serious way, but in a fun way. Like, I don't know. And that's what I keep coming back to. The game has just been so damn fun. There's not much to the sandstorms, you know. They look pretty cool whenever they're blowing in and you kind of see them on the horizon. But once they're on you, it's just kind of a blur. You can't really see. It interacts with your buildings in strange ways, like the building itself is filled with dust flowing around. I don't know. You just kind of wait it out. You can watch it pass over on the overhead map, which is cool. Radiation is kind of the same deal. It just applies an effect to your screen, like a blurry effect on your screen, and you have a little indicator that starts to build up. You got to get it the hell out of there before it fills, otherwise you keel over. And then once you get out and that meter drops, you can go right back in and start the process all over again. So it's not advanced by any means, but it all adds to the fun regardless. Now, as timing would have it, Star Citizen just rolled out some dynamic weather broadly, and hot damn, does it look good. I'm not sure if it has much impact yet beyond visibility, but I know impact is planned. But they sure nailed the atmospheric feel of it. Like whenever you're in the rain, like it feels like you're in the rain, and it's amazing. But even the casual way that weather impacts gameplay on Dune has me excited for CIG to take weather in Star Citizen so much further. I love what we're seeing so far, for sure. I'm hearing turbulence is near. That'll be awesome. And it's exactly the kind of gameplay impact I'm talking about. Now, let's talk about some of the constraints of Dune and generally how the two games feel as MMOs. They both bill themselves as one after the all. It's not going to be a totally fair comparison because one is released and one is years off, but fuck it, let's do it anyway. A world in Dune is 20 sieges attached to a deep desert grid. The 20 sieges are primarily PvE areas. They have a few PvP POIs in them. All 20 sieges are identical. They're just sharded instances of the same map, and they're named. You choose which one to play on, and the max concurrent player count on each of these shards whenever the game started was 40. I heard they increased it to 60 shortly after launch, but I have not verified that. Each siege runs on one game server. All 20 of these shards connect into a single deep desert instance. The deep desert is a giant PvP area. We'll get back to that later, but it's a giant PvP area that consists of a grid of tiles run by a number of servers. It seems to be using the same meshing technology that's offered by Unreal Engine 5 that, things like PAX Day use. So you can travel across the deep desert and you're transitioned from one server to another as you do. There's like a handoff process and it works fairly well. I noticed a little bit of jank occasionally, but not as bad as PAX Day, which I believe, again, is using the same technique, though, to be fair, PAX Day is not a released game. Funcom has strict limits in place for each tile in the deep desert. I believe it's 100 players total, a max of 50 for any faction or lack of faction. So right away, if you're a follower of Star Citizen, you can see the pragmatism in this approach and the lack of ambition when compared to something with as lofty goals as Star Citizen. But how does this affect the game? A few observations from me. First, the seats you play on in the Haga Basin feels about as populated as most POIs in Star Citizen. You really don't run across that many people outside of those that you're playing with. Occasionally you do. But it's a pretty large area for 40 or 60 people to share. Now, it's possible that my experience is a little bit skewed, a little different here, because on our server, we have a fairly large guild population within each siege, but that's my experience. It certainly doesn't feel empty. It's just enough to make the world feel... It's just enough to make the world feel shared, in my opinion. Now, when you transition to the deep desert, which they use kind of an overworld map for, by the way, you literally fly out of a magic barrier on your siege, which is on all sides of the map, and that takes you to a point-and-click minigame where you fly your ornithopter to a whole nother map. In this case, the deep desert, there's some other locations too, but they're not that important. They have trade centers and whatnot. The deep desert funnels all these shards into a shared shard grid, like we said, and as a result, it feels a lot more alive. You run across other folks a lot more frequently. While each tile is limited to 100, the total population across the entire deep desert is much higher, and so when you're flying your ornithopters over the dunes, it's not uncommon to see others doing the same. To see others building bases or mining below. Again, it feels like the right level of aliveness. Now, to scale further, Funcom has many, many worlds, right? If each world is a collection of these 20 sieges and a 9x9 deep desert grid, they scale that further by just copy and pasting that. So I don't even know what their world count is up to, but each world is a complete copy of each other world. And each world is also named. You're pretty locked into the world that you choose. It's kind of like choosing a realm in World of Warcraft Classic. That's your home now. Short of some kind of a transfer process, which does not exist in Dune, you aren't getting off that world unless you re-roll your character or something like that. Now, you can move between base and shards, like the PvE siege shards that we were talking about, with some limitations previously, mostly around building. To start, like if you went from your home siege to another siege, you wouldn't be able to build in that siege, but that limitation was just lifted in today's patch. So that's already gone, that limitation. Okay, so it should be clear now why I call this a triumph in pragmatism. It's known working pieces, known working methods that were all brought together to make a really fun game that, in my opinion, has made a pretty big splash. There's no crazy limits here. The limits are all consistent with what most other survival crafting games provide, and yet it feels new. They've done just enough different, like with the overhead map, connecting to a grid and bringing those various shards together. It's kind of just enough to make it feel new and different. And yet these are exactly the kinds of limitations that CIG and its backers will not accept. And that's okay. Gaming would be pretty damn boring if everyone did the safe thing, right? To be clear, we need folks that are doing the safe thing, and we need folks who are pushing boundaries. When you look at the unofficial road to dynamic server meshing, there is nothing pragmatic about this. Now, don't get me wrong. I am absolutely confident that down in the weeds where the code is being written and the decisions are being made at kind of the micro level, I'm absolutely sure there are a lot of pragmatic decisions being made. But when you zoom out and you look at the whole plan at this level, nah, not an ounce. This is pure ambition. This is like saying, fuck it, we're going to the moon. And that too is amazing. Just as Dune's launch has been amazing, so too is the progress towards this just incredible. There's still people questioning, I hear it all the time, like, why do we need all this? Like, server meshing was done 20 years ago. Like, why all that? The answer should be clear by now. Look, I want to put more people in my Idris than will fit in an entire siege of Dune Awakening. And I want to fly those people through space, through planetary atmospheres, through wormholes, and I want to deliver them and their ground vehicles that have been loaded onto my Idris to places of my choosing. I want 1/6 scale worlds. Well, actually, I want 2 scale worlds, but hell, we need to relent somewhere, right? We want massive space battles and player-built stations. And I want those stations to be the home to more people than will fit in the entire deep desert of Dune Awakening. We want distances measured in gigameters. And we want flash mobs to be able to organize events like the Daymar Rally. And I want it to just work. We don't want to have to think about 50 or 100 player limits, right? Obviously, there's no magical, infinitely scalable systems yet or on the horizon. Star Citizen, like other games, will have limits. We've talked about those and why they exist extensively on this channel. But we, collectively, really want to raise that bar. We want it to be almost out of sight. And you don't achieve that by playing it safe. It doesn't mean you can't make a game in a safe manner and knock it out of the park. Dune Awakening delivered on that. And it doesn't mean every game needs to be safe or do it that way. We need the trailblazers, right? Also on the topic of game architecture, let's talk about cheating. Dune Awakening, like so many games that have come before it, has placed a lot of trust in the client. This is something that Star Citizen's architecture gives them power to minimize. There's obviously performance benefits associated with trusting clients. Anything that you trust a client to calculate on its own, it's work that your server does not have to do. But as we all know, Really trusting a client is impossible. Imagine if Amazon trusted you to calculate the total of your cart on checkout. That wouldn't work too well for them. And yet that's exactly what games do in the name of reducing latency, which is a real problem in need of real solutions. Amazon can afford extreme server authority because, well, A, it has no choice, and B, you don't mind waiting an entire second or two whenever you click that checkout button. You would mind a whole lot if you had to wait a second after you pressed your crouch key before your character actually crouched. Right? That would be a completely game-breaking, disruptive experience. But in reality, MMOs like this, they don't have a choice either. It's kind of getting out of hand. You know, the various anti-cheat systems are wholly ineffective at this point. They simply don't raise the cost of cheating enough. Go Google it. You'll see how people are circumventing this stuff. From kernel hacks to second machines, they will go to great lengths. It reminds me of, I used to have some buddies who would hijack satellite TV signals. In your receiver, your satellite TV receiver, you used to need to plug in a card or a hardware key of some sort to decrypt the signal coming down from the satellite. You know, and this encryption was just constantly broken. Entire networks sprung up to make sure that it stayed broken, to circumvent this stuff. And you know, there was an arms race where like the satellite companies would continue changing the encryption keys and the community would keep breaking them. Definitely is reminiscent. Anyway, the only real long-term solution is to not trust the client. Now, Star Citizen is poised to do that to a large extent, given its kind of robust architecture for server authority. Games like Dune Awakening are not. And so the only solution that Funcom is left with is human power. Rapid bans, ban waves, mass account actions, you know, people monitoring what's going on in the games and quickly dismantling it. You know, can they implement something like this effectively? I mean, we'll see. But if you Google Dune cheats, there's no end to what people are capturing on video. Speed hacks, teleportation, invincibility, bypassing in-game security measures, which allow them to steal bases, vehicles, you name it. So, again, when you're looking at the massive complexity and planned scalability of Star Citizen's backend, keep this in mind as well. Now, we know that Star Citizen has its own cheating problems, and I'm not suggesting it's immune, but I am suggesting it's better positioned to respond. It has more tools in its arsenal, or its tool belt, as the result of these investments that we're seeing. Human effort may still be a part of it, no doubt. But just as an example, when the game server in Star Citizen is calculating my ship's velocity, and using that to calculate its position over time, and it's telling my client what that position is, what its speed is, and it's not trusting my client to calculate those things, well, speed hacking becomes a lot more difficult, if not impossible, in that scenario, right? Now, other hacks like aimbotting, they're likely going to remain a challenge. So, no doubt there needs to be systems put in place to counter this, because the effect of cheats on games can be devastating. MMOs, most of all. You know, you want to cheat in your single-player game, that doesn't really affect me at all. Even in games where, like, the length of the game is much shorter, like maybe a MOBA or, you know, a Call of Duty match, like, yeah, cheating is really freaking annoying and that shit, and it can definitely ruin your experience from game to game, but in an MMO, where cheating causes ripple effects throughout economies and guild positions and combat readiness and like all this stuff, and it could just have like these really long lasting effects. Like, that's why I say I think we've long passed the point where MMOs need to treat like trust the same way somebody like Amazon would treat trust, which is don't trust. And I understand that has massive ramifications for latency and all sorts of things, but we need to figure something out. Now, switching gears again, I wanted to touch on some takeaways for me. You know, I spent a lot of time playing Dune and thinking about Dune itself, reflecting on its successes, its pain points, and why it all worked so damn well. But I also spent a lot of time playing the game and thinking about Star Citizen. And here's what I've come away with so far. The survival aspects of Dune are tremendous fun. They're immersive, they're engaging. You know, the survival aspects of Star Citizen are something I have not felt aside from having to chug a cruise every once in a while. I'm eager to see this get a lot more attention in Star Citizen after playing Dune for so long. You know, today, like, Star Citizen can feel dangerous, but it's often because of how disastrous things can go, because something didn't work properly and you just didn't put enough preparation into, like, making sure that you can manage all the things that can go wrong. Possibly not even your fault. And again, the timing on this is good. Like, weather is making its debut. I look forward to this gaining weight. I look forward to being able to, like, see, like, my character is too cold in a cold rain. You know, if I'm not wearing protection, or to worrying about freezing on tundra planets, to dealing with radiation hazards and wind turbulence, a star that's too hot. You know, I'm bummed we never got kind of the star disruptions that we were supposed to get in Pyro. I'm hoping they're on their way. Fire, lack of oxygen. Just, I look forward to the environment of space being enemy number one. You know, at least for the first 50 hours of Dune, the environment felt like enemy number one. And I want every second that I play of Star Citizen to feel that way. Like, I don't think the dangers of space should ever not feel like enemy number one. This topic could probably be a whole video in and of itself, and maybe it will be, because I've been thinking about it a lot, so we might come back to that. Another thing, Dune actually has an exploration game loop. I know, that's crazy, right? Part of this is because the Deep Desert map completely resets and changes weekly. And so, you know, weekly you need to be out there scouting and probing to reacquire the lay of the land. Even in the basin, like, the locations of resource changes whenever that storm comes through to kind of rearrange the Deep Desert. I wouldn't call it strong exploration gameplay, but it's there and it has value. Like, our organization has already been planning around how, like, we're going to do all of our reconnaissance and mapping after each reset, and so we're talking about it, and it affects our gameplay in a fun and cool way. You know, in the game they also have systems for trading data acquired via exploration. I'm hearing from our people that the market is pretty shallow at the moment for that stuff, but I hope to see that make gains over time, and I hope to see, you know, that become more impactful, and I hope to see the same thing in Star Citizen. Space is a vast and crazy thing. And while I'd never want to see CIG do something like weekly resets, because, let's be honest, one of the things we want from Star Citizen is a sense of realism. But they have mentioned the possibility of shifting wormholes. I think anything moving around, it seems to me, would give rise to exploration and mapping and a whole market, right? Like, I'd love to see more wormholes. I'd like forgotten craft, like derelict crafts floating through space with long lost data that you could scan down and obtain. Maybe comets flying through solar systems with super rare resources, or strange signals originating from unknown places that need investigating. I mean, there's so much more they could do. An environment that shifts around and moves around, I think, will bolster the exploration profession. And seeing the surface of that be scratched in Dune definitely had me thinking about all the possible implementations in Star Citizen that I would love to see. Another thing, I love the durabilities in, like, the durability systems that games like Dune employ. It keeps things needing to be repaired or replaced, and it's just such a fuel for the economy, whether it's an economy of labor or trade. It's there and it works. With engineering and crafting making its way into Star Citizen, I'm eager to see where they go with this type of thing, or if they go anywhere with it. I'd love to see an active like repair and replace loop on components at least. Chips, bases, you know. I think that would be amazing and go a long way for a lot of the economic things we're craving in the game. Now, when it comes to base building, while I appreciate Dune's flexibility, even though I understand it's not as flexible as some games like PAX Day or even the original Conan Exiles, I'm not someone who really loves building structures. I mean, I'll build one. My structures are all square and functional. There's nothing decorative. I don't care how it looks. It's just, can I park my ornithopter in it? Can I get a buggy in it? That's it. Is there a box in there that I can put some stuff in? And, you know, the base itself looks like the boxes that are in it. But the fact that we can build is amazing. It definitely helps make the gaming world feel more your own, and I'm so looking forward to base building in Star Citizen. And that feeling you get, like you're impacting the universe. It's becoming more of yours. But I very much welcome just connecting hab units in Star Citizen. I don't want to get all like in placing walls and stuff. It's great, but somebody like me, hab here, connecting tube, that is the perfect level of detail for me. And I learned I'm still and always will be a space trucker at heart. I've always loved moving boxes in Star Citizen, and I found that in Dune, I still love moving things. I loved hauling spice in from the deep desert or crystals from our remote mining outposts, and I expect I'll continue to be that guy. So, keep on trucking is what I'm going to be doing. And how about, one thing I found myself yearning for in Dune as I played it, there was quite a few things actually. Things like dropping items on the ground and having them stay there. You know, it's not perfect in Star Citizen yet, but, you know, in Dune, you drop something on the ground and you got a time limit before you can pick it back up before it just vanishes forever. Or physicalized boxes of goods. You know, I've gotten to the point where I just kind of take that for granted in Star Citizen, but it's such a cool thing. When you go back to a game like Dune, it's just, you know, everything's an inventory screen. A box is just a screen, a grid screen. Your inventory is a grid screen. You're just dragging things between them. Nothing's really physicalized in the world. When I drop a gun in Dune, it just becomes a little sack of goods on the ground. When I drop a gun in Star Citizen, it looks like a gun's on the ground. That kind of stuff's really cool. I miss that. But the number one thing that I kept yearning for, and I'm still yearning for, is combat related. Going into Dune, I was looking forward to some kind of combined arms activities. And while I do have several ground and air vehicles, when it comes to PvP, only really one type of air vehicle matters. And the ground is really the worm's domain. I've yet to see any actual combined arms gameplay. Because if you're on the ground, like, you're worm food. Maybe I'm not looking in the right places at the right time, but this is something that Star Citizen just already knocks out of the park. And, you know, I can't wait to get some of that, more of that in Dune. You know, a lot of the kind of previews and stuff we were seeing in the game kind of showed that, where you would have ornithopters flying overhead and ground vehicles on the ground doing their thing and infantry, but it's not really playing that way. Now, I know Funcom's talking about it. They're talking about bringing in things like tanks and making them more viable. I don't know how it's going to work. I'm very eager to see. I don't know how you could put anything on the ground out there without a worm eating it, unless it's going to be focused around some of the rocky islands, and maybe that's where they're going with it. But coming from Star Citizen, where an operation like A Lion in Mine, you have, you know, your command ship in space, you have escorts, you have various ground vehicles that you could employ. You have infantry on the ground reporting. I mean, you can definitely see the call to arms vision, and you can see it working in Star Citizen. And I would love to see more of that in Dune, no doubt. Finally, as I kind of hinted at in the above information, you know, Dune Awakening just rolled out its first major patch. You know, so Although I just said there's only one kind of aircraft that matters. That could be changing. They just did some balancing changes on the aircraft. We'll see if it has much of an effect. Initial analysis is probably not, but Jerry's still out on that. They did a lot of design tuning in this patch. Like I said, at first you were locked to the seats that you chose on character creation. Now you can move freely between seats and build on any of them. So that's a big improvement. You can basically rehome just by building a base on another siege. So lots of good changes like that, little quality of life things. I'm hoping the vehicle balancing does make combat more interesting. I know they're adding things like shoulder-mounted rocket launchers that may be more of a threat to vehicles. They kind of nerfed the ornithopter meta, where everybody just flew around in scouts with rockets. They made it so that running away is actually an option now. It never was before. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But the deep desert, where all the PvP happens, just saw massive changes. Now, as I said at the beginning of this video, the deep desert was a 9x9 grid, with columns 1 to 9 and rows A to I. Previously, row A was PvE. So like whenever you first transitioned into the deep desert, you were in a small PvE area, so you wouldn't be ganked on zoning in. And you could also use this like PvE shelf to set up like a forward operating base that was safe. And a lot of people use that. But if you went beyond A, you were in danger. Beyond row A, that's where the PvP happened. But they just expanded that zone, that PvE shelf, to cover half the desert. I'm personally not very optimistic about this change. It means that PvP will be compressed to half of the space we previously had. And like I mentioned, things were already feeling pretty alive out there in the larger space. But you had enough space that you could play the evasion game, right? And that's the thing I love very much about Star Citizen, like the feeling of a vast area of play, making it possible to evade encounters while still having that sense of danger. So this compression of the PvP zone feels like a big step back for PvP, for me. But we'll see. I wish they would have expanded the size of the deep desert as a whole to accommodate a larger PvE area if they felt that was a good change. That way you would increase available gameplay for, those looking for more of a PvE experience, but you would not be doing it at the expense of people who were enjoying the PvP area. I just think that would have been a much better solution to whatever they were trying to solve. But I understand that also goes back to the architecture and the grid, the 9x9 server-backed grid, and would likely have involved significant server expansion. I bring this up because there's always debates around this exact thing in Star Citizen in the community, right? So, it's worth observing this and seeing how it plays out in other games like Dune Awakening. What significant changes like this, what impact they have on the community of gamers in this game. My take is this. This was a rapid response to a dip in players, many of who were probably complaining about the lack of access to endgame resources, who were not interested in conflict. That's fair. But what do you do after acquiring those resources? I'm guessing you dip out again. So it may have very little impact on the final state of the game's population while reducing the size of the sandbox for those who are interested in conflict, who are already sticking around. I've said this before in the context of Star Citizen, and I'll say it again in the context of Dune. Retaining interest is done in one of two ways. One, conflict and control. Two, a content drip. That's it. I see no other way of keeping player interest. And I am so sick of content drips. It can never drip fast enough. That's the problem. So give me a working sandbox, mostly void of cheating, with plenty of friction and combat, and just let me go. And I say this as somebody who's not a great PvPer. I've got my ass kicked a few times in the deep desert. I've got my ass kicked more than I've won. And that's okay. So if you give me that, introduce new things to keep things fresh, sure. But I don't need or want a constant wave of new tech tiers and new dungeons. Fuck that. And by the way, conflict does not need to be raffle stomp PvP. That's certainly a form of conflict, but there could be others. I personally prefer the PvP kind, but I could see possibilities around like influence over various aspects of the world achieved by other means, and that could be really cool too. And Dune has some of that through what they call the land strat, where, players can vie for influence and voting power in the land strat to choose bonuses for a faction in a given week. That's cool. It's not super impactful yet. It's a little bit impactful. I'd love to see that go further. That could be a source of the friction that I'm talking about, but it's just not developed to that point yet. Anyway, I'm off my soapbox, and that's all I got for now. The point of this was, some high-level compare and contrast and discussion on the technical decisions and architecture of these games, and to touch on the ramifications of each. I hope you got something from it. If you took a break from Star Citizen or whatever game you were playing and were enjoying the launch of Dune, let me know about it in the comments below. What are your thoughts? Were you as optimistic about the launch as I was? Less so? I'd love to hear it. And I know we just had a big patch in Star Citizen and another right around the corner, right? I will be getting in there to put them through their paces. When 4.2 landed, I heard some mixed things on it, so I was like, I'll keep having some fun over here, but, as usual, I expect the 0.1 patch that follows to fix some stuff and improve the state of things, so I'm looking forward to that. How about you? Have you dug into 4.2? Give me your thoughts. I'd love to hear them. And what about the meat of this video? Anything I missed? Is there anything you saw in Dune that you gotta have in Star Citizen now? Anything you missed tremendously from Star Citizen while you were playing Dune? I'd love to hear that. And don't forget, we're chatting with Tyler on Friday. Get your questions in on the launch of Bitcraft Online, or anything related to Space-Time DB, or whatever. I look forward to discussing any and all of these things, as usual, in the comments below. Until then, Grollo out.